I like Audrey Assad a lot, especially as like more modern contemporary music. We kind of make fun of some contemporary music as being Jesus is your boyfriend music, because a lot of the songs seem to kind of be like that. But Audrey Assad writes some really good, like, theologically sound songs that are really, really wonderful. So she's a great one to check out sometime. So thank you for singing that. That's beautiful. Thank you both. We're going to start today by reading in 1 Chronicles 21, 1 to 8. And this is from the NRSV UE. Satan stood up against Israel and incited David to count the people of Israel. So David said to Joab and the commanders of the army, "Go, number Israel from Beersheba to Dan, and bring me a report so that I may know their number." But Joab said, "May the Lord increase the number of his people 100-fold. Are they not my lord the king, all of them my lord's servants? Why then should my lord require this? Why should he bring guilt on Israel?" But the king's word prevailed against Joab, and Joab departed and went through all Israel and came back to Jerusalem. Joab gave the total count of the people to David. In all Israel there were 1,100,000 men who drew the sword, and in Judah 470,000 who drew the sword. But he did not include Levi and Benjamin in the numbering, for the king's command was abhorrent to Joab. But God was displeased with this thing, and he said to God, "I have sinned greatly in that I have done this thing, but now please remove the guilt of your servant, for I have done very foolishly." You can read the rest of chapter 21. I was going to read the whole thing, but I decided not to because it gets pretty eerie. God does some stuff to Israel. God's not real happy. And you may be saying to yourself, well, what sin did David commit in this? And what does this have to do with what we're talking about? Well, there's an unhealthy commandment out there that we think that we are not a success unless we're bigger and better than the other ones. And if we're honest, we do this a lot, not just church-wise, personal lives, work lives, whatever life we have, we do this a lot. And here's what God is upset about. Satan stood up to David and incited him to go count some numbers. He wanted to make David a little nervous about what was going on. So David got nervous, and rather than put faith into God to protect him, I need to go count my numbers and get that satisfaction and that feeling of security from my massive army. So he did. He had him go out and count the numbers and come back and report this large army. A little bit better. I know I got this large army to protect me. Well, his sin was that he placed God secondary to the army. He stopped trusting God to be faithful to protect David, as God has shown over and over and over again to Israel. And David went with what he had created through his army and kind of forgot about God's hand in that, forgot about God's protection, and just found satisfaction in his own greatness. And David's got huge numbers. But David is showing a lack of faith. But it wouldn't be too hard to be David and feel a lot more security with this massive army you got. 1.1 million men and 470,000 in Judah. I mean, almost 1.6 million soldiers. If you go also in Scripture, in 2 Samuel 4:9, it also gives another census of his army. His numbers have increased. They have continued to go up. Let me frame this in some modern times a little bit. You can compare David's army at that time to today's armies. The only army bigger than David's in today's world is China. The only army bigger. Israel and Judah combined, the only army that would beat it is China. Now, if he just had Israel, there's only 4 countries right now that are still bigger than what Israel had. China, North Korea, India, and the United States of America. That's it. That's a big army David has. I don't know who can come against that army, but that's a big army. So I could see why for David that'd make him feel somewhat secure. I'm going to be all right. Look what we've done. Look what we built. Look how big and great and glorious and powerful we are. Who's going to come against us? Well, God will say, well, if I wanted to, I could probably wipe out that army and start over, David. don't forget, I'm the one who freed you from Egypt. I'm the one who placed you in power. Right? Remember, think about David, the least of 7 brothers. The least. Little David with a slingshot. Right? Not this great big warrior. Again, God shows up in these really remarkable ways and calls some of the people that you would not think of. Like even when David got picked among his brothers, God told Samuel, hey, listen, you're going to go and I'm going to tell you, don't look at the outside. Don't get enamored by what you see, about all these people that you see. I'm going to place it in your heart. You'll know who is going to be the king. You'll know who the one I'm calling, because I look at the inside of people and not the external, which I love. And David, and Samuel does, he goes through, he looks at all of your brother, and this brother's good looking, this brother's big, this brother, there's this little David. Nope, that's the one I want. This guy, yeah, David, I'm calling you. And we tend to forget this, right? We get a little bit of success and power, we get a little bit of, we achieve our goals, and we make it about us. What I always kind of find interesting a lot of times when we achieve things is, look at what I did. But when we don't, why did God do that? We do this. Well, maybe God may have hands in both. Maybe both or both. And I would say we're working with God in and around our lives, hopefully. But David in this moment is kind of forgetting about God and just being satisfied by what he has. And I get it, and I understand it, and I've been, I have fallen into this trap as well. When I first did youth ministry, started youth ministry about 2011, and the church I served was known for these massive lock-ins, 70, 80, 90 kids, and they get blow-ups and food and all this, and it was just whatever. We didn't really ever have like a good-sized youth group, so it seemed like people would come to these lock-ins, but not. So I take over. I'm just trying to figure it out, and so I'm like, well, try one of these lock-ins. I'll get to know kids, and I don't know, we had 70 people, and I'm going to tell you, it was the most atrocious event I've ever done in the history of mankind. I don't know why anybody thinks it's a great idea. Let's stay up all night long, because I'm sure everybody's going to get along really good at 4 a.m. That doesn't happen, and I get really grouchy, right? And so, like, things just went off the rails. I probably should have been fired. I mean, in all honesty, I'd love to go into detail. I don't want to. You may be like, we may not want him here. Yeah. But it was bad. So bad that the kids said, we gotta meet about this. You messed up. I'm like, oh, I know I messed up. I don't really know what I'm doing. So help me figure it out. Like, I don't have issues with people sitting me down saying, Chad, this was a problem. This thing didn't work out well. Yeah, I know. Help me fix it. I don't like it when people say, you messed up, and they walk out the room. Help me to fix it. And those kids sat me down, and they helped me to fix it, to figure out what is going on. That's why we were enamored by like, we took pictures and posted it. You would have thought, oh, this is great. Look at all these kids. This is wonderful. It was a mess. It was unhealthy. Things went wrong. And so we had to put in some really strict rules. Who could be there and couldn't be there, and there was expectations. I mean, I've never had to, like, kick kids out of youth before, but it had to happen. Unless you're willing to abide by, you can't be here. If you're going to do these things, you can't be here. I mean, I've had kids sneak in all sorts of stuff into lock-ins before. We had to do some really hard conversations with parents and families, and it was tough. So the numbers went way down. And I was starting at the bottom, hoping to maybe get 10 kids. And it took years. About 4 years later, we had 50-some kids. And it would go up and down at times. Anywhere from 30-ish to 50-some kids. And people would kind of get nervous when we would dip. We might have a big graduating class. One year I graduated 12 seniors. Big graduating class. In 2 years I had graduated over 21 kids. So naturally you're going to have a dip in numbers. Well, the church would get a little nervous. Well, what's going on? The numbers are down. And they get excited when the numbers were up. But what I saw was healthiness no matter where our numbers were. Because we wanted to create a healthy ministry that had a good culture, where people are growing in faith and connecting with one another. We're learning to respect one another. Where they're being able to sit down and have tough conversations about their own faith. Creating safe spaces for kids to explore who they are and what they believe. And so to do that, to create that healthy space, we had to shrink a little bit. I've always said I can get you numbers. You want numbers here? I'll get you numbers here. I've seen churches do it. You know what they do? They usually do a drawing for like money. Have you ever seen that? Like, people show up. I know churches who do this, and they pack the house. And I get the idea of it. It's like, let's just get people in the church, and maybe they'll be moved by the service, and we'll do it. We can do all these little promos to get them here, free this, free that, do this, do that. We can do that all day long, and that can pack the house and make us feel good. But if they don't return the next week, or we don't get to know them, or we don't build relationships to them, what's the point? I can get you a big youth group. I can roll an event out. We could roll an event out next week. You've done youth long enough. We could roll an event out next week and get you 70 kids here. They won't come back the next week. But you'll feel good for that one day, right? Because it's got to be more than that, though, right? It's got to be more than that. So bigger isn't always better. It does make us feel better, though. And numbers are biblical. They do tell part of the story. They tell us part of the story. Numbers are biblical. Right? Jesus says in Matthew 28:19-20, go make disciples of all nations. Jesus wants 100%. Well, they don't achieve it. They don't achieve it, but they try. In Acts 2:41, they talk about how 3,000 people were added to the roll on that day, right? 3,000 people, man, they added, wouldn't get baptized. That'd be a good Sunday, wouldn't it? I don't know where we'd put them. That'd be a good Sunday. Hey, I'll take 1% of that. That'd be amazing. Acts 4:4, talk about how 5,000 believers were added. They celebrated these successes. There's nothing wrong with celebrating our successes. There's nothing wrong with stating that and showing that. There can be a sense of healthy pride in that. Again, that's why I put joys down. Let's celebrate these good things. Like, there's a sense of healthy pride, but then there is unhealthy pride. And the problem we have with numbers in the church, when we think about numbers, a lot of times even in business or our lives, sometimes it's the only thing we count. And it's the struggle and kind of grip numbers have on us, and we kind of need a break from that. For a long time, worship attendance has been the only metric we used to tell if we are being successful in what we do. Well, that's a metric. It's not the metric. Why? Because people don't tend to church as much as they used to. People are used to attend 3 times a month, easy. I don't know, when I grew up, it's probably you went every Sunday. Sometimes people went twice a week. I remember my grandparents would go Wednesday and Sunday. They were always at church doing stuff throughout the week. Well, that's changed a little bit in today's world. We know by the data that people are attending church around twice a month or less. That's okay. That is okay. How are we engaging people in other ways, right? So worship attendance cannot be the only metric. The amount that we get in offering is not the only metric. You could be misguided. Maybe you get one big gift. I worked at a church before where, there's people who have 8 digits in their bank account. They're that wealthy, 8, 9 digits, that wealthy. They could write a check and give you all the money in the world to do whatever. If they're the only people that give, how successful are we being? What if they pass? We have nothing else. That's not very successful. I think there's another metric in the ways in which we give, and that we can measure that can maybe tell us how we're being successful. But even that's a metric. It's not the metric. And the size of our membership roll, it's a metric, but it's not the metric. In fact, I have a real contentious relationship with membership. Today's modern world, man, kids do not want to join clubs anymore. It's not what they want to do. I don't know, you got a young bag, you guys really want to join clubs anymore? Have to take, no, like you're individuals now, much more so than what we were. They don't want to join clubs, but they do want to be part of something. That's what I've learned with young people. They want to be part of something that's doing some good, something that will help them grow as people. But they're not really looking to pledge their oath to something. They want to have freedom to explore. So how do we think about membership in today's world? We got to have some sort of membership to do some roles in the church, but how do we think about it? That, again, That's a metric, not the only metric, but I will tell you, anytime I go to a ministry conference or anything, Chad, where do you serve? How big's your church? Those are the first two questions. And I hate it. Because that's what we just sit there and go, well, we get 60 on service. Well, I get 100. Well, I get 150. It just becomes a show. Pride. And then you start to feel bad. I 60 people. Am I not doing good? Oh, you have 180. Maybe you do really well. I don't know. You start to feel bad about the work you're doing. You get distracted. And this happens when we're young, we're growing up. Young people, you're going to deal with this. Because you're going to have friends of yours. And those who are older, you've probably gone through this. You have friends that get married at a certain age. Maybe I should be married. People get a certain job at a certain age, and they're doing really well, and I'm not doing as well. Should I be? Maybe I'm behind. I hear young people all the time talk about, I'm just behind. You're not behind. We all have our own path. We all have our own time. We all have our own purpose. You're not behind. You're right where you should be. But it's a hard thing to fight. We got to keep up with the Joneses sometime. Measuring, counting, they can help kind of ease our minds at times, make us feel better, give us a sense of security. But we have this thing right here, this thing that beats in our chest, our heart, this thing that even if our mind tells us, oh, numbers are good, this are good, maybe we still got some anxiety that's being placed here. Maybe even David, after counting his numbers, felt good, but still had some anxiety about, well, can we really win if we need to? And we have to deal with that anxiousness. I think we have to have a good measurement tool, but we also have to paint a broader picture and borrow context to really see the health of a church, to see the health of our faith. We have to be able to have some good room to allow God to do God's work and not try to control every little detail. And there are times where we have to release from the pressure and let God just do God things. And I think that last part is what David forgot. And that's kind of what upset God. Think about it. If this was you, play God for a second. Ooh. But imagine just being a good parent. And you have somebody you love, and you've helped them. And you've protected them. And then they forgot about that. How would you feel? A little shunned? Dude, you know I got you. You know I love you. Don't forget that. I think that would be incredibly painful to feel like people forgot about how much I actually love them. Maybe that was God's kind of anger was, David, you're forgetting how much I love you, and I'm going to care for you. So God wasn't real pleased with that. But God doesn't give up. He stays with people. So I think first and foremost as a church, we do have to have an approach of faith first and foremost. The numbers will tell us something, but faith is important. And it's a delicate thing because we can turn in Scripture and places in Scripture, especially in Paul's letters, where people are so faithful they believe God or believe Jesus is returning. You remember what they stopped doing? Everything. They stopped working, stopped doing everything, and kind of threw society into chaos. Paul had to say, hold on a second, we know Jesus is coming back, but until that happens, can you please get to work and put society back into order? Right? If we all just moved in faith with the church and said, you know what, God will take care of it, we have to do nothing, we would be in trouble. Well, I can tell you food's not getting handed out on Thursdays, right, John? That's not going to happen. Well, God will take care of it. I'll just sit here and pray about it. No, you have to actually do it. But God finds ways to provide for us in this church and provide for the pantry. Why? Because we're doing good work. God has done this for you all for a long time. Nearly 150 years you all have been at this location, yes? And God keeps providing through all sorts of circumstances, world wars and depressions, all sorts of things going on, COVID, and you're still here. God is constantly providing. The church budget, right, Rob? It's always a faith practice, right, Steve? A little bit of a faith practice. We're going to put it together. We hope it works, But if we only went by what we know, that we don't know what people are going to give this year. We know what the pledges are, but there's a part of faith that we'll have enough, that we'll have enough in time. But at the same time, we can't be frivolous. We can't just spend money like crazy. We have to be practical and mindful about what we do. We have to make investments that produce good fruit. We have to do that in our personal lives and in our relationships. Put our energy and time and talents where it's going to produce something good. And I believe we put our money where our ministry should be, which is to take care of this place, to take care of our neighbor, and to help to unite people in the love of God and Jesus. My faith tells me we'll be all right. All right, all right, all right. Anybody know who said that? Matthew McConaughey. Let's go. Even if on paper at times I may get a little nervous too, I still believe. But it takes doing, and if we do, God will provide as long as we keep our faith. But it's not just the faith that becomes kind of this issue, right? And I think God shows up in some unique ways. I'm sure David prayed for opportunities to be faithful, or prayed that God help him in his faith. Have you guys ever prayed those prayers for yourself? God, strengthen my faith. God, help me to be courageous. God, give me hope right now. I don't know that God gives us those, but God gives us opportunities to be courageous, opportunities to be faithful, opportunities to see hope. They're presented to us, and David had an opportunity to be faithful, and he kind of messed up. So we get these opportunities. So it's not just faith, but I also think there's one other thing that plagues our heart, and that's envy. I think envy is very dangerous. I think envy is a trick of the devil. It's the one that tells us that we need more, that we're not enough. Look what everybody else has. You need to go get. And we don't find security in who we are and what we already have. A whole world that tells us we need more. That's the world. That's okay. Like, we just own that, right? You just own that. You just know that going in. That's the world. It's a consuming world. But God is going to make sure we have enough. And we do. We have enough. We get envious of the bigger church down the street. I know. I drive past them. I see them. I see their nice little buildings. I see them. I used to work around 3 mega churches in Jeffersonville, all within about 5 miles, southeast, east side, and north side. I saw all their youth groups, all the stuff they do, all the music. I knew kids that were at those churches. Oh, my gosh, it drove me crazy. Because they're huge. 100-plus kids. What am I doing wrong? I'd see their stuff on social media, make me feel kind of bad at times. I had to stop doing it. I had to stop looking. I had to get envious and jealous. I'd question what I was doing. I'd lose focus. That's what the Satan wants. He wants you to lose focus. He wants to distract you. And if we only focus on our sides, if I only focus on growing, man, I lose the relationship with the individual. So I had to stop looking at bigger stuff. I had to stop looking at those things and just focus on what God is calling me to. A friend of mine is a minister down in Lexington at Crestwood Christian Church. He has had some huge baptism classes, 20-plus kids. And I used to get kind of jealous of that, thinking, oh, man, that'd be nice. Instead of being jealous now, I'm like, that's awesome. Congratulations. That's fantastic. Look at those kids. That's great. I want to celebrate that with him. So I've had to learn how to be more gracious and celebrate the good stuff. Well, you know what that does? It keeps away the envy. And this plagues us in our personal lives. Got to keep up with the Joneses. Got to keep up with the neighbors. And don't get me wrong, it's great to achieve. And we should shoot for achievement. We are built to do amazing things, but we are not human doers. We are also just human beings. Sometimes we just need to be. Right, Laura? That's your word, be? We just need to be. And I think part of that is redefining, even for us as a church and personally, what is the success? Now, the definition I found that I really loved, it said a success is the accomplishment of an aim or purpose. And I really like that idea of purpose. Knowing that we all have different aims and we all have different purposes, but it's what we do with those that will define our success. We all have different talents and abilities. What do we do with that defines our success? But I even think that's kind of small thinking, because it's not always about what we do and what we accomplish. I think about people who are not as able-bodied. If we only make it about what they do, well, if you're not very able-bodied, you may not be able to do a lot physically. But boy, you can make some people feel really good. Right? There's a lot of people, and I'll use Alex as an example here. Alex is somebody that has changed my life in meeting him. Alex is amazing, amazing young man here. Don't tell me that kid doesn't have love and wouldn't brighten your day in a heartbeat. That is Alex's purpose. To bring a little joy into every place he steps into. That's what I see in him. I mean, the Gospel of Luke, Jesus sends out his 72 disciples, and they come back telling Jesus, look what we accomplished, Jesus. We brought people. He's like, that's great. That's wonderful. However, the best part is the relationship you've helped them build with you and with me. That's the best part. That's the thing we focus on, that relationship with each other. So our success will be determined by the depth of our relationships with one another and with God and with Christ and with our neighbors. That's how we'll judge success in this place. That's the focus, not to grow, to make us feel better, but to deepen our relationship with our Creator, with our Savior, and with each other. You don't need 100 friends to be successful. You need a good core. What you'll find, especially in times of sorrow and grief and loss, you have some friends that'll show up, won't you? Pat you on the back, give you a hug, tell them how much they love you. You just need a couple good ones like that. Real depth to those relationships that you know that they got your back. People come to this place, I want them to know that we have their back, that we're with them, that we love them. Having great people around you, our personal relationship with God, with Jesus, it helps us to deal with struggles and everything that's thrown our way. And our focus in church is to build those. Build those through connecting with each other. So with each other as we serve alongside in one of our ministries that we do. Our relationships can deepen in our studies. I know you guys have some fun time in John's classes, but we've talked about having some more studies. We're going to offer more at different times just to gather up and grow. Maybe we can just get together and do some fun things. We talked about that, didn't we? Just get together, maybe have some games, right, Ann? Just hang out and play some games together. Just have some fun and connect. Those relationships, people become interested in hearing more about God, about Jesus. They may want to try out what this worship thing is all about. They may want to learn more about the Bible and your own story of faith. We can also repair and begin to repair hurtful relationships that people have had with church. That right now is probably one of the number one reasons why people don't attend. There's been too much church hurt going on. We have a responsibility to repair that, to own it. So the unhealthy commandment is, we are not a success unless it's bigger and better. The healthy commandment is, we are a success by the depth of our relationships. And I pray that we focus on our relationships with each other, with God, with Jesus, and then we just watch what